So thanks so much for coming on. Good to see you. Uh, I think we first met in Catholic Underground, Connecticut, and um, that's where we started. And then we kind of lost touch for a little while. I think the pandemic might have been part of that. I haven't seen you in a while. But since then, you've started up Catholic Truth. So why don't we start? Would you give a little introduction about what's Catholic Truth? What are you doing with that?
Sure. I started an apostolate, a ministry called Catholic Truth, and it's an apologetics and evangelization organization. And it's really dedicated to helping Catholics to know their faith deeper, to love their faith more, and to explain and defend their faith as well. So it really, what I want is for Catholics to live their faith with purpose and passion. And really just love being Catholic, being set on fire for it. And I think there's such a need for it today, a need to really know our faith and be able to know what Catholics teach and why. In fact, I want anyone from anywhere to be able to come to Catholic Truth at any time to find out what the Catholic Church believes, why it teaches that, and how it can change your life.
Great. So the more you were talking, the more I'm thinking you're a really great person to have this conversation with, because I've been thinking about what's the conversation that I really want to have, and the conversations that I really want to have are usually stuff that I'm processing in real time. But what I'm really interested in is there seems to be, when I'm in dialogue with someone who doesn't believe what I do, a lot of times I find that there's a tension between being real with someone and being logical with someone. And there was an example of this that really stuck with me when I was in college. I was having a conversation. There were a few of us friends at a dinner table, and we were eating together, talking together, getting kind of philosophical. And there was a point where I was the only Catholic at the table. The rest of them were agnostics. I went to a tech school. We were all getting science degrees, and so that was kind of what I was surrounded with half the time. I had one foot in the Catholic bubble and the other foot in the God is dead bubble. And so that's who I was talking with. And there was a point in the conversation where it could have gone both ways, where we was like, well, do we want to have a philosophical conversation? Like, why do I think that there's good reasons for people to believe in God, kind of in the abstract? Or do we want to go down a path of why do I believe what I believe? Like, what's the psychology? What's my personal life history, I guess, testimony? And I ended up going down the logic route. And I think part of the thought process was I was with another guy who was another physics major, and we were like having those conversations. Another part of it was up until then, I was really in the sort of Catholic apologetics YouTube rabbit hole where I was looking up, debates on the existence of God, and I was taking notes, and I was like, this is my moment. I have this, I think I had the argument from motion kind of in my head at the time. And so I just went down that road. And the way it went was we kind of debated it back and forth, and it was a good discussion. And at the end of the day, he did something really weird. He just questioned the concept of motion. He's like, you have this intuition of motion, and it doesn't stretch, like it's just an intuition that you're basing your whole argument off of. And I didn't really have a good response at the time. And so at the end of the day, he kind of had this statement of, you have this intuition for this philosophical idea, which you're basing your whole worldview off of. And that was his punchline. And I realized at the moment that I wasn't basing my whole worldview off of that statement. Like, that's not really why I believe what I believe. We got to this point, and the conversation kind of ended because I wasn't really sure how to respond to that. And we kind of went our separate ways. And to this day, I kind of wish I went down the route of explaining my experiences and why do I believe in Christianity? Not necessarily, can I present an argument that I heard from YouTube to your conviction, right? And so I think that's kind of an example of what I want to talk about. Whereas there's sometimes, in that case, there was this colorful and obvious branch in the road where we could either talk about a philosophy or experience. It's not always like that, but the reason I bring it up is from when I scroll down your YouTube channel, it seems kind of left brain, and I think you kind of alluded to, you want people to understand what the Catholic Church thinks. You don't want people to go around with misconceptions in their heads, and that's absolutely useful. And I wonder if, like, when you think that this is the need that you see the church has a need and this has to get filled, where people have misconceptions in their heads, and that's the biggest barrier, right? Where we've lost this sense of objective truth, as a culture, or maybe you want to put out ideas that are correct and reinforce them, right? And that's kind of what I get from your YouTube channel when I scroll down. And I don't know if that's how you perceive your YouTube channel, but that's kind of where I'm coming from, in the sense of I see a need to be more comfortable talking about people's experiences, and that's kind of why I started the podcast. I want to talk to people and get to do that. But I'm wondering, do you have different experiences, or what do you see the need as, or you have a take on that theme? I kind of rambled. I want to give the floor to you, but I kind of wanted to set the stage and get to really, I think this is the conversation I'm really interested in having. I want to get your response, but.
Yeah, I think we could go in a lot of directions with this. So if I get off track, and you can bring me back, and I'll answer anything that you want. But
take the floor.
I think, at least for Catholic Truth, it's twofold. One, I do want Catholics to really learn their faith, know their faith, be able to explain it, defend it, be set on fire for it. But I also want to help grow Catholics. We want to accompany them in their journeys. We want to help them to become holier, to know God more, to be transformed by him, to be filled to overflowing with the Holy Spirit. So it's both. We want them to encounter God and have that experience, but we also want them to have the knowledge aspect too. And I feel like those two pillars are why people leave the church. Number one, tons of people, like probably your friends, probably have lots of questions about God that they've never had answered, that nobody probably can answer that well or to their satisfaction. So on a lesser level, teens, young adults, many people in the church have tons of questions, especially with scandals and other things going on. And most people don't really answer our questions. They say, well, you just have to have faith. Well, God's a mystery. Let's not do this or that. And so they never get their questions answered. So it doesn't seem to make sense. So they leave. We think the church and the faith and God make complete sense. And so when you give that to people in a way that makes sense, they're much more willing to stay in the faith and live out that faith. On the other side, many people don't know God. They pray and they say prayers, but they don't really know God. They don't know him on a deep level because we've never been taught to pray. We've never been taught to know who God is, how he is, how to connect with him on a deep level, how to get our prayers answered. What does it mean to listen to God's voice? How do you hear God's voice? Nobody teaches us this stuff. So on the other side, we want to help people to come to know God. And so many people leave the faith because they just feel like their prayers aren't answered, or God's ignoring them, or God doesn't love them, or why did he let my grandmother die? And so if we answer these questions, and if we help people to know God, both of these pillars will keep people in their faith and really help them to have a fire. So unfortunately today, the majority of people are emotionally minded. They're emotional about a lot of things. They're not deeply intellectual. And so a lot of times, especially on the internet, you have these people who just beat everybody over the head with intellectual arguments. Most of the people's arguments for not believing in God, or just for being lukewarm and not living their faith, they're not intellectual arguments. They're emotional arguments. Either I'm lazy, or I just don't feel like following the rules. I don't want anyone to tell me what to do. Something bad happened to my grandmother and she died. Oh, my kitten died. I heard that one recently and I'm mad at God. There's 1,000 reasons why people blame God or mad at God. And so we give them all these intellectual answers, and that's not the issues they're struggling with. So we have to discern as evangelists, what is this person's real problem? What are they truly struggling with? Because unless you get to the root of the problem, then you're not going to be able to diagnose the problem properly. You're not going to be able to uproot the roots of disbelief. You're just going to be picking off the leaves. Like a lot of people say, oh, well, the Crusades, the Inquisition, these are just leaves. These aren't their real issues that they struggle with. They're just smoke bombs. So if you find their real issue, then you can really help them to get, I guess, from point A to point B. And that's really what we help people to do. I mean, we've helped so many people stay Catholic. We've helped bring many Catholics home, and we've helped even bring non-Catholics home. So it's been a real blessing.
Yeah, no, this is a conversation I love having, especially with, theology degree friends of mine who they really love that they're good at the knowledge and the history and the arguments and the philosophy and the ideas, and they love that side of things. And something I'd like to tell them is you have to convey the truth in a way that it's going to be received, or else or you're not saying anything important to the other person, right? You have to figure out
Exactly.
what are the desires of their heart, and how do you speak to those, and you can articulate the truth in those terms in a way that's relevant to that. So I love this. I guess my follow-up question is, uh, I guess, what's your inspiration or what's your vision of when that's firing on all cylinders, when you have this vision of what Catholic truth does, which I think is hits the nail on the head as far as I'm concerned. Like that's exactly where I was hoping this would go. Um, what does it look like when it's firing on all cylinders? Because when I look up when I was looking up on YouTube in high school, um, knowing that I was going to go to a secular college and I was going to the internet for advice on atheism, really, because I knew it was a secular school.
Exactly.
I was getting arguments, logical arguments, and I was
Right.
taking notes on those. And I didn't hear anything about this. And this was something that I learned from getting my, feet thrown into the deep end of the pool with a couple of bricks. Like that's how I figured this out. You got to balance the logic with speaking to the other person. Um, and so, if you have a role model, I assume it's not the people I was watching on YouTube. So, like, who do you look to for inspiration, or what's your inspiration? Like, what's your vision? Like, is there an example of what it looks like when it's going well, or an example you had in mind, or?
Well, before I answer that, if I could just do a little self promotion, and for your sake too, if you want it, but I wrote a book and it's called Why Do You Believe in God? I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's actually 15 real conversations that we've had with atheists, that I've had with skeptics, non-believers, and people who have left the church. So it's dialogues, and I actually transcribed them. And so you get to hear both sides, what they say, what I say. So it's really, I think, a lesson, a course in a sense on how to evangelize, not just the arguments, but how to say it, how to be an expert and ask questions to get people to think, how to deal with people who get upset and angry without getting upset and angry yourself. And there's a lot of apologetics notes in there at the end of the chapters. Oh, this person did this and this. Here's why. Here's what to look for. So it really helps you to know how to evangelize, because you're right. Nobody's teaching us these things. There's a huge need in the church for it. And when I first started evangelizing, I was kind of like you. I was shy at first. And then when I realized the Catholic Church was right, and I memorized all the arguments and scripture verses, and I could outquote Protestants, and I started becoming a jerk and a fiery, I didn't mean to be a jerk. I was just passionate, and I wanted to tell them they were wrong and show them the truth. And then when they couldn't get through their stupid, stubborn heads about how dumb they were, this is not how I think now, this is how I thought then I got angry, and we used to have fiery discussions. And it all came to a head one day when I talked to one woman, and she started yelling at me, telling me that I'm a man, that I have no rights about abortion. She's like up in my face. And long story short, I yelled right back at her, nose to nose, and we were yelling at each other. And I was telling her she's going to hell. She's telling me I'm a loser and all this other stuff. And I walked away really angry. 5 minutes later, I came back and I realized that my friend Bridget, who couldn't explain her life, couldn't explain her faith to save her soul. She just doesn't know apologetics. But she had this woman, Bridget was sitting Indian style on the cement. And this woman was laying on the cement with her head in Bridget's lap. I don't know how they got to doing what they're doing, but Bridget was stroking this woman's hair with the most tender love you can imagine. And this woman is coughing up her lungs, just crying her eyes out. I might have ruined her for life and turned her away from God. Thankfully, Bridget was there and just loved this lady and just loved her. And right then, God, seriously, struck me with a lightning bolt and just literally converted me that day and told me that all of evangelization, everything we do, is literally about love. If you don't love, then don't evangelize. If you're going to be a jerk, then don't evangelize. If you're the one who's yelling and screaming and condemning and calling names, then you should not be evangelizing. You need a deeper conversion. That's what I would tell people. And I did. And that God converted my heart that day. And as you said, I still have the intellectual arguments, but now they're all couched on every side with love, understanding, not trying to win an argument, but trying to care for their soul. And that really helped me. I mean, because no one really gave me an example too much. So God kind of taught me, almost like St. Paul. He knocked him off his horse, gave him revelation, and sent Paul off to preach. So in a sense, God taught me, I feel like personally, how to evangelize. And so I've always tried to be a model of that evangelization. I've always tried to be a model of hardcore, uncompromised truth of Catholicism, Catholic truth, and but also with passionate, fiery love for the person, just caring for their soul, respecting them, even if they're yelling in your face, seeing beyond that and seeing someone who's broken, who needs God's love even more. So there are some other organizations that do that, like Trent Horn's really good at that. Jimmy Aiken, anyone and everyone from Catholic Answers is very good at that. Father Bishop Barron is very good at that. Father Mike Schmitz is excellent. He's always loving, even on the tough topics. There's people who are just really nasty and they just condemn people to hell. And then there's people who have the same message, but you want to listen. Because if you say it in a way that makes people want to listen, you might as well not even have the truth to begin with. We need the truth and the love together.
Oh, absolutely. I see this when I'm talking about politics with friends on the other side, where a lot of times it's not so much about getting facts straight. It's more about they want to be heard, and they want to feel valued.
Right.
And that kind of forms the basis of some of their politics, it seems. And being able to see past that and to talk to them in a way that's salient to their situation is better than having all your facts in a lot of situations that I've found. So yeah, Father Mike Schmidt is someone who comes to mind when I think of someone who's got it both, in the sense of he got the logic and he's got the love. How do you turn this into a model for Catholic truth? Like, do you have a I don't know, a mission statement? You have a mission statement, but is there a level of detail beyond that, or are you just kind of doing this intuitively?
I mean, it's more of just our actions. I mean, I've been evangelizing for 2 decades now, so I have a lot of experience evangelizing on the streets, going to Protestants and Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons, to their doors, to their churches, evangelizing anyone and everyone, countless conversations with atheists. And we try to really do it through our example. Sometimes once in a great while, we might take the gloves off and just let people have it because it just needs to sometimes, like Jesus, flipped the tables. Now, people use that example for everything. This is why they yell and scream at people all the time, because Jesus did. But he only flipped the tables once in all of Scripture. But yet people use that as an excuse to be a jerk all the time. Now, sometimes, every once in a while, you have to hit a subject hard. But 97% of the time, it's ours. Even when we do hit it hard, we do it with great love. But we try to make all of our videos with love. We try to make them all loving. We try to make them all non-judgmental toward people. Even if our comments, we have people yelling at us every day, all the time in our comment section. And we try to start all of our comments by saying, thanks for your comment. I realize that you're a troll and, you're just, on here to attack Catholics, but we love you. We're going to pray for you anyways. I try to just be kind and loving anyways. And sometimes, it's harder on the internet for sure. I have to be prayed up and you have to, be slept up, because you can be succumb to giving into just answering people without loving them. But I think we try to do it through our videos, through our retreats. I mean, if you come out to one of our retreats, from beginning to end, we're going to love you in different ways. And that includes telling you the truth. That includes loving you where you're at, respecting you. I ask all the teens when we give retreats, how many people here believe in God? How many don't? And how many people aren't sure? Raise your hand. And we have and I say, I really don't care. If you tell me you don't believe in God, that's fine. I'll never judge you. I just want to know where we're at so I can give you the best retreat possible. And, I really just try to reach people where they're at. And if someone says they don't believe in God, I say, great, I'm so interested. Why don't you believe in God? That's very fascinating. And so they'll say, oh, well, this. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Those are some good objections, but have you thought about this? I'd love to get your thoughts on that. So I personally am someone who asks a lot of questions. I try to get to where the other person's coming from. I try to understand them first. I think that is a model, of love. But I think in a lot of videos, in a lot of comments that I see even on Catholic Truth from other people, it's just condemnations. You're going to hell. You're a heretic. You're a Protestant loser, like all this. Who's going to want to listen to that? So we try to be a model in our podcast, on our videos, just being loving to everyone, no matter how hard the topic is. I mean, we have topics on homosexuality, transgender, and different things like that. And we try to be even more loving, gentle, kind in those type of hot button subjects. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm loving this. A couple places I want to go see if we can get to before we wrap up. Do you think that this is historically, or when we talk about church culture, do you think we tend to lean a little left brain on this stuff when it comes to, we tend to, if we're not sure of ourselves, we resort to logic? Or so, for example, like when I'm playing piano and I'm trying to learn bossa nova for the first time. This happened this past week, and I have no idea. I listen to a song and I like it, but then I try to emulate it and it's very, very awkward and clunky and I can't do it. And then I got to go find instructions that say, oh, your left hand, you're supposed to play on the first beat, the and of the two, the three, and the and of the four. And you got to really just drill this into your head 50 times until it's second nature. And then, once you're used to the left hand, then you could start, then you have the freedom to be more intuitive. When we're talking about evangelizing, and this is exactly my reaction to, I was going to college and I never talked to any atheists before, so I went online and looked for instructions. I think that's what I was doing, and
that's basically what this is.
Yeah, and it seems like people who go looking for instructions are just guys who don't know what they're doing. Guys who haven't been trained, or guys who haven't
exactly,
who are missing something. I don't want to say fatherless is a strong word, and it's provocative. And I love my dad, and we played catch growing up and everything. It's nothing about him. It's just in the church culture, I feel like I wasn't prepared for having conversations with atheists. Right? When I went for advice, I would find half the coin, the logic half. Is that just Google returning what I searched for? Or do you think there's a church culture of being, I don't want to say rigid. I feel like I keep using the phrase left brain.
Well,
but
I think if I can jump in, I think it's both. I think our church is split, unfortunately, and both sides of the coin are disordered and in need of repair. So on the one side, you have the rigid Catholicism, which is you're going to hell, you're wrong, it's this way or the highway, who cares what you believe? If you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. If you're not Catholic, you're going to hell. And, a lot of people who would just condemn you, and there's a growing, rad trad movement that's happening, as opposed to traditional Catholics who don't usually speak to people like that. We're talking like a growing militant arm of radical traditionalism is kind of like that in the church. And on the other side, you have the liberals and the modernists and people who are just like, oh, it's okay. Whatever you believe is fine. Well, I personally don't believe I have to go to church on Sunday. I personally believe that using contraception's okay. Is just live and let live, don't judge people. Let them live their own life and you live your life. We don't need doctrines or commandments. So you have this, well, you have the people who follow the rules, but they're cold, they're mean, they're angry. Then you have people who don't care about the rules, but they're nice, they're loving, they're not judgmental. What we need is both. We need people who are hardcore about the faith and won't compromise the rules, but are also loving, kind, and respectful. And that is something rare that you find in the church. A lot of the big organizations like Dynamic Catholic, Catholic Answers, Word on Fire, they do have that. But there are many, many more, who don't. What we need is both. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Being cognizant of your time. Maybe one last thing is, what's your takeaways or lessons learned for, I guess, internet Catholicism? And a lot of times you see this, I don't know, anger that kind of comes out in a YouTube comment thread that probably wouldn't happen in real life. And one thing that I do is, if I'm talking to someone online, I completely ignore the tone, because a lot of times the tone is my projection of what I think they're being, and I ignore the tone. I take them literally and have the conversation, just let it move forward. What's your you have any advice for I guess, I don't know, internet Catholicism?
Well, that's more difficult, but I think in general, I kind of just want to reiterate this. If you want to evangelize for Christ, you need to be praying for at least 30 to 60 minutes a day. If you're a serious evangelist, you probably need to be praying for an hour a day, because there's not a chance in this screen world that you can reflect Christ and be a good evangelist and, really exemplify Christ if you don't have him in you and you're not praying. You can't give what you don't have yourself. So all the saints, Mother Teresa, all the big evangelists, they all say we have to pray. And sometimes during this Lent, we might need to look at ourselves and look at how we speak to people. And a lot of us, we have issues. We have struggles. We have pain. We have anger. We have unforgiveness. Some of the most angry, judgmental, condemnatory Catholics I know online are the ones who struggle themselves spiritually the most. They don't think God loves them. They think God is mean and hard and rigid. They think God is judging them. They think that God won't forgive them for those sins that they did so long ago. And so they're really projecting a lot of their false understandings of God on themselves, their spiritual life, and on other people as well. They kind of react to other people the way they think God's reacting to them, but he's not. So I think a lot of these people need healing too. In addition to praying for up to an hour a day, we need to be looking at our lives and saying, does my life look like Christ's? He was kind, gentle. He was humble. He was obedient. I mean, even when he talked to the Pharisees, he was always super incredibly kind and nice and patient. Then he would call them out and he wouldn't take their crud, but he always did it with great, great love. And in fact, in Matthew 23, it says that he cried over the Pharisees because God had rejected them forever and they were probably going to hell. And Jesus wept because he wanted them so badly to go to heaven. He wanted their souls so badly to be with him for eternity, and they rejected him. And have we cried for souls? I mean, yeah, we want to tip tables like Jesus did, but have you cried for souls? Have you wept for them? Do you long for them? Do you wish for nothing else for them to come to know Jesus? If you don't, you're evangelizing for the wrong reasons, probably. We need to have a love for souls, whether you're online or offline. And in my book, Why Do You Believe in God?, I actually give the top 10 do's and don'ts for evangelization. And we talk about a lot of these things of what to do and what not to do, so that we can be good examples for Christ. Because if we represent Christ and we're jerks, why would anyone want to come to know Christ? If fundamentalist Protestants come up to me and tear me apart, why would I ever want to go look into the fundamentalist Protestants? Because they're mean, they're rude, and most of them are. They might have the truth, but who wants to listen? So we really need to take into account how we speak, how we act, and our virtue, and basically don't embarrass Christ. I mean, when Christ was on the cross and people were yelling at him, spitting at him, telling him he's going to die, telling him he's not the Messiah, what did he do to them? He forgave them. He prayed for them. He never got upset. He never got angry. He loved them to the end. And we have to have the exact same attitude in the church if we're going to successfully evangelize. We have to be passionate about souls in order to successfully evangelize, but we have to have the capability. I mean, if you go into marriage and you smoke and you drink and you swear and you kind of sort of beat your wife sometimes, you have a history of violence, why would anyone want to marry you, first of all? Second of all, you're not going to have a very good marriage because you haven't worked out your own issues first. The more you work, if you want to have an exceptional marriage, the more you work out your own issues first, and the more of a healthy individual you are, the better you'll be able to love your spouse with, and the better you will have a happily ever after storybook ending in your marriage. It's the same thing with evangelization too. The healthier you are as a person, the more you deal with your own crap, the more you deal with your own issues, the more you deal with your own pain, your own sufferings, the things that you struggle with that you vomit on everyone else. The more you deal with those, the more you're going to save souls, the more you're going to change lives, the more you're going to make a difference and shine the light of Christ in this dark and fallen world. Here's the deal. we try so hard to convert people and we get so angry when they don't convert because we think it's all about us, and it's not. It's Christ who does the heavy lifting. And almost every conversation I have in here, I said as soon as the conversation was done, I went home and prayed a lot for the person. Praying, fasting. It's like rain coming down. You plant the seeds, that's our job, but God rains. He grows and he brings out the harvest. It's also, he does like 95% of the work, but we try to do all the work on our part, but really we just need to give it up to him. And that comes through conversion of heart as well. So I think I have a ton to say on this. But we also, on our YouTube channel, we have the do's and don'ts of evangelization. We have a video on what to do and what not to do. And we really try on our Catholic Truth channel to get people to evangelize properly. And it's a little bit difficult unless people get the message.
Yeah, yeah. I remember thinking in college, distinctly having the thought, wow, I wish I had a book that walked through some conversations with people and gave me pointers based off just stepping back from those conversations and looking at them and giving me pointers based off experience like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think a lot of the conversations I like to have, we like to circle the whirlpool for 2 hours and then kind of get to the middle. I feel like with this conversation though, we kind of jumped right to the bullseye, and I really appreciate it. It was short, sweet, and to the point, and I think it was great. Where can people find you? How can they?
Well, they can just look me up at Catholic Truth YouTube, Catholic Truth Podcast, Catholic Truth Facebook, pretty much Catholic Truth. Our website's catholictruth.org, and you can just put hashtag Catholic Truth as well. But most of those places, you can just find us at Catholic Truth.
Awesome. So with that, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think it's an important conversation. I think it's an important topic, and I appreciate you digging into it more.